Clara aspired to triumph. She desired to have the final say, oblivious to the extent of the harm it would inflict. She articulated it. You frequently engage in disputes to assert your masculinity. It is hardly surprising that you are so little in that location. As soon as those words escaped her lips, the atmosphere of the room transformed. The subsequent events were devastating. Greetings, everybody. Welcome back. Thank you for participating today. We have a novel narrative to present to you. Let us commence. Clara and Alex had been wed for some years. To the majority, they appeared as an ordinary couple, commuting to work, returning home, dining together, and leading what seemed to be a conventional existence. If queried, their acquaintances or neighbors would assert that they were faring well. However, what remained unseen were the occurrences behind closed doors, the minor details that gradually eroded their bond. Their marriage was neither poor nor exceptional. It was replete with minor altercations. Nothing significant, yet sufficient to create a negative impression. Unresolved disagreements were merely set aside. Sarcastic remarks that appeared humorous superficially, however, possessed a deeper significance underneath the surface. Over time, these instances accumulated, transforming into unexpressed grievances. The warmth between them had diminished, supplanted by a silent tension that trailed them through the home like a shadow. Alex had consistently exhibited confidence, appearing unaffected by any circumstance. He communicated with conviction, maintained an upright posture, and concealed his vulnerabilities from others. That was Clara's conviction. She had never perceived him as insecure, nor contemplated the existence of anything concealed beneath his robust facade. However, Alex harbored a secret, a profound personal uneasiness that had plagued him since adolescence. An issue that had been murmured about in his absence, something he endeavored to erase from memory, yet could never fully dismiss. He refrained from discussing it, even with Clara, and during their years of marriage, she remained unaware of its significance. That was until one evening, amidst yet another dispute, she succumbed to her frustration. She spoke without prior contemplation. She did not consider her words before directing them at him, and once spoken, they could never be retracted. She was unaware that a one thoughtless comment would alter everything. The evening was characterized by tension, fatigue, and an unarticulated annoyance that had grown customary in their marriage. Alex experienced frustration. Clara was fatigued. The dispute rapidly intensified, devolving into yet another cacophony, wherein neither party genuinely heeded the other. The altercation was characterized by both parties feeling trapped, prioritizing victory over resolution, and in that instant, Clara was determined to prevail. She desired to have the final say. She aimed to convey her frustration to him, and thus, without contemplation or awareness of the potential repercussions, she expressed it. You frequently engage in disputes to assert your masculinity. It is hardly surprising that you are so little in that location. As soon as those words escaped her lips, the atmosphere of the room transformed. The fury dissipated, however not as she anticipated. Alex refrained from yelling. He refrained from replying. He refrained from hurling an insult at her as he typically would. He simply ceased. His expression became immobile. His jaw clenched. His hands tightened subtly at his sides, and for the first time in their marriage, Clara perceived something in his gaze that caused her stomach to plummet. It was not merely fury. It was not merely frustration. It was significantly more severe. Discomfort. Treachery. Humiliation. The expression indicated that she had inadvertently accessed a sensitive aspect of him that was off limits. A location so profoundly concealed that even she, his spouse, had never genuinely observed it prior. Subsequently, without uttering a single thing, Alex pivoted and departed. Clara remained stationary, anticipating. Anticipating his return. Anticipating his outburst. To contend. To resist as he consistently has. However, he never accomplished that. What about that silence? That was far more detrimental than any other statement he might have made. If you have ever been in a relationship, you are familiar with the typical progression of conflicts. There is fury, there is shouting, and sometimes someone departs abruptly. However, after a period, whether it be minutes or hours, you reunite. You converse, or at the very least, recognize one another. However, on this occasion was distinct. That evening, Alex did not return to their bedroom. Initially, Clara regarded it with little significance. She concluded that he merely required some time to compose himself. He was irate and desired solitude for the evening. He might return in the dead of night while she slumbered, or perhaps he merely required a few hours to gather his thoughts. Regardless, she was not excessively concerned. Upon awakening the following morning and extending her hand towards him, she found the opposite side of the bed unoccupied. An unsettling, unexpected sensation enveloped her at that moment. Alex had no prior experience with this. He had never departed without notice. Despite their most severe conflicts, he would continue to sleep on their bed. Perhaps with his back facing away. Perhaps with a barrier of tension separating them. However, he was consistently present. She rose and scoured the house, anticipating his presence in the kitchen or even on the couch. However, upon discovering him in the guest room, seated on the bed's edge, something seemed off. He was not preparing his belongings. He was neither pacing with anger nor exhibiting signs of frustration. He remained seated, immobile and aloof. As if an internal mechanism had ceased functioning entirely. Clara positioned herself in the doorway, anticipating his response. He remained silent, consequently, she initiated the conversation. "Alex, nothing at all. What is the reason for your presence here while sleeping? No progress has been made." She inquired once again, seeking a response, questioning whether he remained angry and whether he intended to return to bed. However, he scarcely glanced at her. When he eventually spoke, it was not to dispute. It was not to convey the extent of her emotional impact on him. Silence prevailed. His anguish was quite audible. Days elapsed without any alteration. Initially, Clara reassured herself that it was merely a phase and that he would eventually recover from it. She navigated her days as ordinarily as possible, persuading herself that he would eventually move on. However, he did not. Alex evaded her at every opportunity. Upon her entrance into a room, he departed. When she attempted to initiate a discussion, he offered no response. When she attempted to touch him, he recoiled. It was not merely fury. It was more profound. It was as though he had obliterated her from his existence without uttering a single word. Clara attempted to rectify it using her existing knowledge. She prepared his preferred dishes, anticipating that the aroma of home-cooked cuisine would placate him. He scarcely engaged with his meal. She attempted to jest to alleviate the atmosphere, but he remained unamused. She attempted to be affectionate by grabbing for his hand or lightly brushing against him as they passed one another. However, he tensed at her contact. Nothing was effective. At that moment, she comprehended a chilling revelation. For years, she believed that conflict signified the existence of anything worth defending. As long as they were disputing, they still possessed sufficient concern to feel anger. However, at this moment, there existed an absence. What about that silence? It surpassed any prior altercation they had experienced. Because it seemed that a connection between them had already ceased to exist. Clara failed to see that her remarks inflicted enduring pain beyond the immediate moment. They not only humiliated him but also wounded his pride. Her words had exacerbated a wound. An injury that existed long before her acquaintance with him. A scar he had endeavored for years to overlook. Alex has consistently been aware of his physique. He refrained from discussing it, even with his most intimate pals. Throughout his upbringing, he consistently perceived himself as inadequate. He recalled the jokes, the taunts, and the murmurs behind his back. A rumor circulated about him during high school. A chat initiated in the locker room. An assertion that lacked veracity. However, it was inconsequential. It was sent to the incorrect recipient, the girl with whom he was infatuated. He still recalled the manner in which she had gazed at him subsequently. Not with wrath. Not even with compassion. Merely apathy. It was as if she no longer perceived his presence. The moment lingered in his memory. Despite his advancing age, the insecurities did not dissipate. He brought them into his partnerships. Initially, he believed they were inconsequential. Until that day arrived. His most recent significant partner had betrayed his trust. He had discovered the treachery. When he inquired about the reason, she did not weep. She refrained from pleading. She made no attempt to deceive. She only shrugged and conveyed the truth to him in the most brutal manner conceivable. You are unable to fulfill my needs. That was the moment that obliterated him. That was the moment he learned to conceal his insecurities so profoundly that no one would ever perceive them again. He refrained from discussing it. Never permit anyone to approach that aspect of him. He developed resilience, exuded confidence, and persuaded himself of his enhanced strength compared to the past. Subsequently, he encountered Clara. She was distinct. She did not belittle him. Did not compel him to demonstrate anything. In her presence, he experienced a sense of security. Adored. For the first time, he was unburdened by the concerns that previously tormented him. He convinced himself that she perceived him authentically. His past experiences were no longer significant. Prior to that evening. Until she confronted him with those remarks. You frequently engage in disputes to assert your masculinity. It is hardly surprising that you are so little in that location. That singular sentence transported him to the past. Return to the mirth of high school. Returning to the treachery in his most recent relationship. Reflecting on each time he had dedicated to persuading himself that he was greater than others' perceptions of him. Moreover, the most unfavorable aspect. This time, it did not originate from an unfamiliar source. It did not originate with a high school girl or a deceitful former partner. The source was Clara. The one he believed would never utter such a statement. For the first time in their marriage, he was uncertain if he could ever perceive her in the same manner again. He contemplates whether she is already being unfaithful. Clara arrived to her limit one evening. She recognized that, while awaiting a return to normalcy, circumstances appeared to deteriorate. That night, she entered the guest room to converse with him and offer an apology, anticipating his presence seated on the bed. Perusing his phone like he had been for weeks. However, the room was devoid of occupants. The shower was operating in the bathroom, while his phone was on the bed, its screen illuminated. Clara had never been inclined to examine his phone. She still exhibited hesitation. However, she assured herself that she would merely glance briefly. She scarcely engaged in any activity before noticing an email notice on the notification box. Subject: concerning divorce proceedings. Her heart ceased to function. She gazed at the TV, her breathing shallow and her thoughts racing. Separation of marriage. Separation of marriage. Negative. This must have been an error, a misinterpretation. She desired to accept that notion, however within she was aware of the truth. This was not only a confrontation. This extended beyond her statements made that evening. Alex was not merely angry. He was not merely inflicting punishment onto her through silence. He was about to go from her. A surge of panic engulfed her. Her hands quivered as she placed the phone down. She retreated from the bed, her body taut with unnamed feelings. That evening, she could no longer be silent. She needed to be informed. Upon his emergence from the bathroom, she was already awaiting him. Her pulse raced as she inquired, are you genuinely contemplating divorce over a single disagreement? After several weeks, he finally gazed at her. However, it was not accompanied by fury. It was devoid of grief. It was devoid of any substance. His voice was unsettlingly composed when he finally articulated. Do you believe this pertains solely to that evening? At that time, Clara comprehended. This transcended mere insult. It was not solely about the remarks she had directed at him. This encompassed all aspects. The unaddressed conflicts. The psychological detachment. The injuries they had neglected for an extended period. Her remarks that evening were not the impetus for his departure. They constituted the ultimate provocation. Clara had erred. She was aware of that. She had inflicted pain upon him in a manner she never imagined conceivable. She was now eager to rectify her transgressions. For the first time, Clara confronted a daunting question. What if she had already forfeited him? She exhausted all options. She repeatedly expressed her apologies. Not alone by words, but also through acts. She attempted to contact him. To evoke memories of the life they had constructed collectively. She prepared his preferred dishes, left him notes, and attempted to engage him in conversation on various topics. Employment, meteorological conditions, a trivial matter. Regardless all her efforts, he continued to be aloof. He responded to her inquiries with brief, vacuous replies. A gesture of acknowledgement. A gesture of indifference. A silence, I am uncertain. However, that was the issue. She sensed that he was aware. He was aware of his desire to remain here. She feared that his silence constituted his response. Clara had always maintained that regret was a rectifiable matter. Provided you are committed to rectifying the situation, you can reverse the harm caused. However, this was distinct. This was a type of regret that no degree of effort could obliterate. What about Alex? He had commenced withdrawing. All Clara could do was observe as he receded farther into the distance. Contemplating whether there remains anything to cling to. One evening, she passed past the guest room, only to be halted by an unexpected stimulus. Alex stood beside the bed. A suitcase lay open before him. His garments were meticulously arranged within. He was preparing his belongings for transport. Her breath was constricted in her throat. This was the moment. He was indeed departing. Her body acted before her head could comprehend. She entered the room, unable to articulate her thoughts. When she spoke, her voice was scarcely above a whisper. Are you truly departing? Alex exhaled deeply, his shoulders elevating and descending under the burden of something more substantial than mere fatigue. He did not immediately direct his gaze towards her. He remained stationary for a minute, his hands clutching the suitcase's edge as if to stabilize himself. Ultimately, he oriented himself towards her. I am uncertain if I can overcome this. The words struck her with the force of a blow to the chest. She had mentally equipped herself for fury, for a confrontation, for him to finally express all the sentiments he had been suppressing. However, this serene, subdued ambiguity. It was far more distressing because this was not his intention to harm her. This was his truthful declaration. Tears accumulated in her eyes, cascading down her face before she could prevent them. She was indifferent. She was indifferent to pride, dignity, or any other considerations. She was very aware that she was unprepared to relinquish him. I hold deep affection for you. Her voice faltered. I made an error. If I were able, I would retract it, but I am not. Kindly instruct me on the necessary actions to take. After several weeks, she observed a change in his countenance for the first time. He remained silent for an extended duration. He remained stationary, gazing at her, as though contemplating whether any remnants of their connection persisted. Subsequently, he articulated his thoughts. What you stated cannot be retracted. His voice was subdued yet resolute. I cannot unhear it. However, I may not wish to depart. Not at this time. It was not forgiveness. It was not a commitment. Nonetheless, it was significant. At this moment, that was all Clara had remaining to cling to. Alex remained that night. However, the damage persisted. The path to recovery will be protracted. Clara understood that certain injuries could not be healed swiftly. The fundamental inquiry was whether their love could last. What is your opinion? Is it possible for a marriage to endure such circumstances? Please share your thoughts in the comments section below. Thank you for your continued viewership. Until we meet again.